Please join me in welcoming George McKerrow, Jr.
Good morning, everyone. I am George McKerrow, and I'm truly honored to be here today. To be in a room full of such exciting people and to watch my cousin get up and demonstrate all that energy she's got and all that intellect, it's a little bit intimidating. Congressman, thank you for your kind remarks, and everybody in the room, I just want you to know that I'm humbled to be here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my history and my story, and then I'm going to try to relate it to sort of the feelings that I have about being an entrepreneur and being a small businessman here in the United States of America today. And I think that it's just a wonderful community that you live in. And I got the pleasant evening last night out at Bear Dance and saw the moisture come and create nature's drink a little bit and watched everything come back to life. So we're lucky to be here. We're lucky to be in this part of the world, and I think you all know that. So I was born in Wisconsin. My father and family are dairy farmers and in the sheep and cattle business. And I moved to Ohio when I was 8 years old, and then I actually lived in Pittsburgh and Upper St. Clair from my formative years from 9 to 15. So I have a fondness for Pennsylvania and moved back to Ohio, graduated from Ohio State University. So I went to college in a tumultuous time from 1968 to 1972. We all know that if history tells us we lost Martin Luther King, we lost Bobby Kennedy, the country was in turmoil, we had rioting, and we had all sorts of things on the streets, and it was a tumultuous time. And so I wanted to be a lawyer, but I worked for the Attorney General of the state of Ohio, and I took the LSAT test, and I managed to get into one little college for law school, but I really looked around and said, do I really want to be a lawyer? Or do I want to go out and pursue other dreams? And I got a job in the restaurant business as a busboy. I'd done that in high school. And the first thing that resonated that's true throughout my story is that when I was in 8th grade in Pittsburgh, we took a civics class. And our teacher had us write the proverbial, what do you be when you want to grow up? And I wrote down, I want to be President of the United States or an entrepreneur. And he came back and failed my paper and said, A, you're not smart enough to be President of the United States, and B, entrepreneur is not a job. Well, I'm going to disagree with that. I want to talk about a little bit about it. I don't think it's a job, but I think it's a spirit, it's a feeling, it's who you are as an individual that relates to how you do your life. So an entrepreneurial spirit really isn't a job, but I knew back then when I graduated from college that I really didn't think I wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't think I knew exactly what I wanted to do, so I got a job in the hospitality business. I remember my father coming down and saying, so what are you doing here, son? And I said, well, you know, working in a restaurant. He said, well, I just paid for your college education. You're supposed to go to law school this fall, and your mother tells me you're not going to go. I said, well, I'll go next year. I'm just having fun. Said I'm making lots of money, lots of good-looking girls around, having a good time, and I'll go to law school next year. Well, I'm 65 years old, and I never went to law school. I've never been out of the restaurant business. So it is a little bit, it's contagious, I believe, the hospitality business is, and it's of the service of others. And that's been a profound part of my life. So I went to college, I went to school, graduated, moved actually to West Virginia to a small town called Franklin, ran a restaurant for a family down there, and escaped the maddening crowd and got back to nature a little bit. And we might have been hippies back then, I guess people thought of us. But the end of the day was I got married and decided I need to find a real job. So I got a job with a company called Victoria Station Restaurants. Some of you may remember it. There's actually in the restaurant industry the pioneers of the casual dining restaurant business were Steak and Ale, Victoria Station, Cork and Cleaver, and it was all prime rib. And the rest of it, I got my one and only job I've ever had working for others. And I took that job in Columbus, and they moved me to Cincinnati, and from Cincinnati I moved to Atlanta in 1976. Worked my way from assistant manager to regional manager, but there again, I kind of looked inward and said, do I really want to be working for someone else, or do I want to be working for myself? And I felt a strong desire to create my own job, my own world, and be in complete control. I laughed when I told Betty last night. I said, the definition of an entrepreneur to me is a man or a woman who will work 100 hours a week to avoid working 40 hours a week for somebody else. And that's really, I think, a true statement in many ways. And so I had a friend come to me and say, found this really cool concept down in Texas, Honky Tonk Saloon. At the time, the big restaurant chains were starting to struggle with quality and assurance and delivery. And things had changed for me. I was now working for a big company and I wasn't getting that fulfillment. And so, you know, I went to Texas and I saw this Honky Tonk Saloon in Austin called Hofbrau, and it's serves 7 steaks, 1 salad, potato, bread, and butter, and in a Western saloon. And I thought, you know, this is a time in our country. Urban Cowboy was the hot movie with John Travolta, for all the ladies in the room. You know, and people were, you know, were really looking for a different type of cuisine and some authenticity, I think, to their dining out experiences. And we decided to build this group of restaurants. And the guy came to me and said, I've got the money, I'm going to give you the sweat equity, and you're going to get, you know, 25% equity in the company. So I quit my job as a regional manager, moved into a little bitty apartment, and I started to design and study, and I went down to Texas and I sat for days in the restaurant. And I actually told everybody there, I will admit, that I was a recruiter looking to hire people, and I got them to tell me everything they could tell me about the business, and I wrote it all down. And I go here because this is a theme throughout what I believe you have to be a successful entrepreneur. You have to have a plan. Absent a plan, you can't be successful. So when you talk about entrepreneurism and entrepreneur spirit, that is certainly a key element. But having an accurate, well thought out, actual business plan that makes sense and delivers a product or service that someone will seek to purchase, buy, or repeat is extremely important. And when I see young students in colleges, or I'm asked to speak in an entrepreneurial class, I get a little confused because I'm not sure it's a class on how to be an entrepreneur. I think it's an inner spirit and a self-actualization, but then you also have to be a successful entrepreneur. You have to have a business plan. You have to have a serious plan. So I put a plan together, and we started to build the restaurant. I put up some money, and away we went, and then he disappeared. And I couldn't find him anywhere. We didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't have barely a fax machine. This was 1980. And he disappeared, and I finally found him. I said, what's going on? He said, well, the investor fell out. I didn't really have the money. So I found out, you know, here I am. I've quit my job. I've got a young daughter at the time. I've got, you know, I've ended my career, and I've started to build this restaurant. I actually was a bartender at night and building the restaurant by day with my own 2 hands. And the great big plumber we owed a big fat check to that was pretty mad at me, and things weren't going very well. And this is where I think you have to learn, if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, that you have to truly believe in yourself, and you have to have a high risk and high tolerance for failure. Because then and there, in all practical purposes, my adventure to build the first Longhorn Steakhouse failed. We were in debt, we had no money, we had no investor, and what we had was my partner running from bank to bank, where's the bankers in the room, with my resume as a young 30-year-old regional manager and a kind of a brand new concept, not very bankable, needless to say. And so the end of the day was, I thought, wow, this is a moment in my life where I can either give up my dream and go back to work for a big company, or I can keep the dream in my pocket, refocus and re-energize and go out and find a way to succeed. So I rewrote my business plan. I went to my father and I asked him to loan me the money. and he agreed to loan part of it. I went to 2 other businessmen and make this a CNN version, and we did it. We all went to the bank, and we went to the accountant, and the accountant said, this looks like a reasonable plan, but 95% of all restaurants fail in the first year. We went to the bank, and we got wined and dined at a big fancy lunch, and the banker said, 95% of all restaurants fail, collateral is nothing, and it's not worth 10 cents on the dollar. But I really like the plan. I like what George has to say. So we'll loan you the money. Jimmy Carter was president, interest rates were 16%. We'll loan you the money at 70 cents on a dollar. So we're over collateralized by 30%, and we'll charge you prime plus 2. And my dad said, give the boy the money. And we made a deal. And that was the founding of Longhorn Steakhouse. We went back to work, and the only thing, it's kind of a funny story. I could tell you stories all day long, but remember that plumber that we owed the $7,000 to that I told you about? Well, we wrote him a check, of course, the very first day we got refunded, and so he didn't, take me out back. And the end of the day was, I forgot I wrote him the check. So we had $100,000 in the bank to complete the restaurant. The problem was I spent $107,000, so on opening day we were $7,000 overdrawn in the bank. So I had 300 or 400 of my closest friends in for free food and beverage to celebrate the grand opening of the restaurant. The next day I opened the doors. And there's a thing in that little video where I'm holding up the original meal counts. We did 7 lunches and 14 dinners the first day. And the restaurant really failed again over the next several months. I mean, for all practical purposes, we were already in debt when we started. We could not generate enough revenue to actually pay the bills, pay the rent, make the payroll, and keep the restaurant open. So I basically let everybody go, and oftentimes would meet you at the front door, seat you, take your order, make your drink. I was the cook in the daytime. At nighttime, I could afford a cook or 2. But I still believed in what we were doing, and I believed that we were delivering goods and services to the community that they would seek to repeat. Again, it was all part of the plan, and I refused to give up. And lo and behold, there was a little snowstorm in January, and we stayed open, and the neighborhood loved us, and we continued to deliver high-quality product and service to the community. And by the middle of 1982, the restaurant was highly successful. Again, I could tell you all day about hiding paychecks and tell them the ADP forgot to deliver them, or not paying my sales tax on time and waiting for the notice before I would go down, or going to the bank and telling the teller, I'll pay the $15 overdraft, just please don't bounce any of our checks, and all those things. And then all those things happened. And so Longhorn Steakhouse was born on Peachtree Road in Atlanta, Georgia, on a 40-mile-an-hour curve in an old adult bookstore, already in debt before it started. But I do believe that it was the spirit that I was instilled in me as a child from my grandparents and from my parents that allowed me to tolerate the risk, to believe enough in myself to continue to go forward. But take a moment and just talk about entrepreneurs for a minute and say, what do I really mean when I say the spirit? Well, think about it. Many of you in the room, including Paul and Betty, are agricultural farmers. Talk about the #1 entrepreneur business in the world. Henry Ford built cars in his backyard. He was an entrepreneur. Procter & Gamble, one of the largest companies in the world, was founded in the backyard and making soap, Palmolive soap. All of these adventures, when you stop and think about it, the great American spirit really is the same and equal to entrepreneurism. Now, what happens after that changes. What happens after that is there's the true entrepreneur, which I talk about in the video, that it's about inner fulfillment and the spirit of entrepreneur and how you want to live your life versus chasing the almighty dollar. Because many entrepreneurs turn into big businesses, and many of those big businesses change their personality from entrepreneurial to what we call professional or, giant companies. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not the way that I chose to go. So fast forward, Longhorn Steakhouse is highly successful. We build a second restaurant, a third restaurant, a fourth restaurant. We do some franchising, and we get to 1990s, and the public market is available to small restaurant companies. We're doing about $50 million in sales at that time, about 30 restaurants, and we make the decision to take the company public. And that's why I learned the saying that it's never about the money, it's always about the money. Because that's really all Wall Street was about. And you go from an entrepreneurial business where you own and operate, and you plan for the following year, and you plan for the 3-year plan, and you plan the 5-year plan, and you really think about how you want to organically grow, and you're able to know and care for every individual that works for your company, and it really is a family business, and it's a feeling of family, and the culture is one of we all look good together, and we all look bad together. There's no us, there's no them. And then, no offense to anybody in the Wall Street business, Wall Street enters, and the 30-year-old Harvard graduates never worked a day in their life, but they really know how to build models, and they're really looking for predictability, and you're only as good as your quarterly earnings. And I lived all of that. We set out with public money, and we had lots of money on paper, and off we went to build many restaurants to keep up with the growth rate and predictability. And this is where I've always told Wall Street, the restaurant industry is the only industry that orders, receives, manufactures, sells, produces, and delivers its product all in one day. Say it again. Orders, receives, manufactures, sells, produces, and delivers its product all in one day. The only thing predictable about the restaurant business, it's unpredictable. So you couple that with a business of Wall Street that wants 100% predictability. Congressman, we talked about 100%. Impossible, but that's what they want. And they want to be able to look at your growth rate and your model, and they want to extrapolate it out over time, and then get their value, and next thing you know, they're gonna be all right. So we set out to live in that world, and I have to tell you, it wasn't much fun for me. And it really happened. I told Betty this in 1992. I was fortunate enough to be voted the Southeast United States Entrepreneur of the Year. I went to the banquet, didn't know I had won. There was 3 or 4 contestants. I won the Entrepreneur of the Year. I was really proud of it. The next morning I had to report to Wall Street that we missed our earnings by 2 cents. Now that 2 cents amounted to, at the time, about a $75 million annual revenue and earnings of excess of $10 million, $50,000 shortfall. Our stock price plummeted 65% in one day, based on that news. And we're also sued by one of the illustrious law firms that follows short sellers and follows companies that miss their earnings. And that's really led me, as we went through, to decide that maybe a big public company, as opposed to a smaller entrepreneurial business venture wasn't for me. So I stuck around for a while, and actually I hired a management team, and they failed, and had come back in 97 and resurrect the company. And in 2000, I hiked Mount Kilimanjaro in 1990. I'm going to just tell this story for a second, because I think it's funny. So do you all remember the hype in 1999 about what was going to happen to the world, particularly in the United States? The whole country was going to shut down, right? We weren't going to have an electrical grid. We weren't going to have any natural gas. We weren't going to have any banking. We were going to have all those things. And so I watched our company, and our executive team make all these plans, and they spent over $275,000 to get prepared for the catastrophe that might happen. Well, I guess maybe I was a little bit cynical, but then I was chairman of the board and the largest shareholder, and I didn't really have a whole lot of responsibility left. And so I went into a meeting. I said, "Wow, you guys, I get it. I went to college when we had to make those boxes of cards, right? You had whatever they were called, you had to make all. And if it wasn't perfect and the computer was bigger than this room, maybe those computers would shut down at the millennial. but you know, I've got a laptop on my desk and I forwarded it to February of 2000. It seems to work just fine. I really don't know what we're all worried about. But just in case you all are right, I'm going to go hike Mount Kilimanjaro and be in the middle of Africa on the equator where, guess what, if the whole world falls apart, all I have to worry about is food and shelter and a safe place to harbor myself, which is really the way that lots of people in that country live. So that inspired me to walk up the mountain, and my wife and I did that, and it was a wonderful experience, and we spent several weeks in Africa, and I really had that epiphany to come back and say, where do I want to go with the rest of my life? I've been fortunate, I'm financially secure. Do I want to give back more than I take away? Do I want to be an entrepreneur and recreate a dream and try to catch lightning in a jar a second time? Or do I want to continue in big business? And not that there's anything wrong with big business, and if that's where your spirit and your person is, then that's where you should be. But if your person and your spirit is really an entrepreneur, then I think you always have to look for the next adventure. And that brings me to 2000, and so I made that decision, resigned, and in 2001, I was looking for something to do. I didn't know whether to be a consultant, but I had a few fine dining restaurants, but I had watched Ted Turner amass a huge amount of land, almost 2 million acres of property throughout the United States, and really champion the growth and well-being of what's now our national mammal, thanks to the U.S. Congress, you know, a native species to North America called bison. And every other protein that we raise and grow is brought here from Europe. The native species to North America and Canada and the United States is bison. And they truly are a majestic animal, and they truly were abused and used and wiped out mostly by men. I mean, a little bit of nature and a little bit of the rest of it, but we really did set out to decimate the herd. I don't know if you all know this, there's over 30 million bison alive in the United States, and they range from coast to coast in every state in the United States at one time. And they were the primary source of well-being for the Native Americans. But Ted fell in love with the West, and he fell in love with bison, and he's a big dreamer. And regardless of what you think of Ted, I will tell you this as a close personal friend. Yes, he's a little bit liberal right now, but he's not some whack job. He really is a pretty smart, intelligent, compassionate, regular guy, and he's given back more than anybody, and he proved that when he gave the UN Foundation, or set up the UN Foundation with $1 billion, and that had never been done. And I was there personally when he challenged Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and the rest of them to give it before they go, and that has taken on a huge philanthropic goal. So he's not a bad guy, but he loves nature, he loves the West, he loves the land and being out in places like Bedford, Pennsylvania. And so he started with 3 bison, and he amassed a herd, and the bison industry took off. They created a co-op, and they decided that bison was going to be the great superfood to end all superfoods. The only problem was the marketability of it. And frankly, a lot of bison ranchers went broke, and a lot of bankers lost a lot of money that they had loaned, and the industry was struggling. And I had tried to help, and I thought it would work perfectly at Rare Hospitality, but the people that I hired, smarter than I am, decided it wouldn't. And so I went to Ted and I said, Ted, I've got this dream for a classic American grill featuring gourmet hamburgers and other classic American food, and I think we could introduce bison to America's table by bringing it to a high-quality restaurant, serving it correctly, cooking it correctly, preparing it the way people would dine it, side by side with beef, and have it be an alternative, but also a very viable product. And he said, yeah, let's do that. We shook hands, off we went. 2001, in July 1st, our 15th anniversary, sat down with a blank piece of paper, created the concept, created the restaurant, designed it, built it, created every food recipe, and in January of 2002, we opened the first restaurant in Columbus, Ohio. We opened 6 restaurants that year in Colorado, Tennessee, Ohio, and Georgia. We built 56 restaurants in 72 months in 19 states. I want to say that again, 56 restaurants in 72 months. That's relatively close to one a month in 19 states. And once again, we failed. And I say that because, not because concept didn't work and not because we're still not in life, but we went too fast. So I think one of the themes that I have is that I have failed more times than I've succeeded, but I've never given up because I had a plan and because I had a dream and I had the spirit to keep going. And to pick myself up, and I think I learned that as a child from my family and how I grew up. At the end of the day is, the number one thing for a successful entrepreneurial business is that you've got to never quit. 60,000 bison. And that was really Ted's dream. He wanted to help the entire industry. Today I can say that the industry is alive and well and the bison ranchers are well off. To protect the Turner Ranch properties, Ted amassed millions of acres. He has 15 bison ranches across the country, from New Mexico to Nebraska to Montana to Kansas. And he wanted his family and future generations to be able to maintain that property and do it. And the only viable resource he saw for revenue was the bison industry. So again, Turner Ranches are alive and well. And the fourth component of our story was to create a self-sustaining, viable restaurant company that was also a leader in sustainability within the industry. So I will just say this. We've accomplished those four goals now. We operate 46 restaurants in 17 states across the country. Bison is a prolific, viable commodity, although small. Just some quick numbers, about 100 million cattle alive in the United States. Don't know how many are in Canada or anywhere else in the world, about 100 million in the US. There was 56,000 bison taken to market last year. There's about 535,000 cattle taken to market in the US every week. So that just shows you what a niche market it is. But we have a viable now market and we have sustainability. The restaurant company itself employs about 2,700 team members across the country. And one of the things I'm most proud of is our vision for sustainability and kind of protecting our communities and our environment. I'll wrap up by saying that we set out initially to build a restaurant company that had 100% recyclable materials, was environmentally sensitive in the way that we built our restaurants and the way that we occupied space within our communities. And of course it's become, over the last 10 years, a very common practice for most companies to have a sustainable platform or positioning. But at the time we started Ted's Montana Grow, the restaurant industry used 5 times more energy than than any other retailer, 5 times more water, created 5 times more garbage. Just a quick fact, there's about 5 million pounds of wet garbage generated in the city of Manhattan every week, which is put on a train and sent to North Carolina to a landfill. And we can recycle almost all of those things. So we set out, and real quick, we wanted no plastic, no styrofoam, nothing that wasn't recyclable. And that was fairly easy in the way we built energy efficient equipment, captive airs, done a lot with hoods. We use that, we use recycled materials in the restaurant, we position them in the community where they're going to be a viable part of that. And we have low flow valves, and we have wireless urinals, and we have all sorts of things that we do. But when you stop and think about it, you start to take the plastic out of the restaurant, it's pretty difficult. Well, stir stick was okay. Scourge I'll make my little speech, is the little stir stick that they put in your drink, and then we throw it down the drain, and 150 years from now it's still floating around. But we got to the plastic straw. And I remember growing up at Wooley's Tavern in Pewaukee, Wisconsin with my grandmother, and we had paper straws, and I loved to drink malted vanilla malts. And so I started looking around, thank Lord it was on Google, not on Encyclopedia Britannica, and didn't have to go to the card catalog, all things our children don't know anything about, and Googled it up and found that the paper straw was invented in New Jersey in 1833. Found the company, and wow, lo and behold, they were still in business. Jumped on the phone, called up, asked to talk to the owner. Got the owner on the phone, said, hey, I understand you all make paper straws. So I haven't made paper straws anywhere in the world since 1970, George. Yes, my great-grandfather invented the paper straw in 1833, but they haven't made anywhere in the world. This is 2001 since 1970. I said, what do you think? Can we make some? I told him, I'd like to buy them from him. And I got him excited. And he said, you know, I think that machine is out in the warehouse somewhere. And sure enough, a couple weeks later, he called and he said, hey, now he's all jazzed up. The engineers found the machine. It was out in the barn somewhere, right? They found it, and they think they can get it to work. Are you serious? Will you buy these straws? I said, yeah, I'll buy them. He said, well, how many do you want? I said, well, I'll take 10,000. He said, okay, it'll be a nickel apiece. I said, okay, I'll take it. So he said, I'm having to package them in, but I'll make them, I'll get them back to you. Now these were 100% beeswax paper straws, which basically is no different than the interior of an aluminum foil or a roll of tape. It's just rolled paper, right? And it's covered in beeswax. And I actually had forgotten how lousy they were. But, you know, this was part of the plan, part of the positioning was that we just weren't going to have plastic. And so they came, and, you know, they met with mediocrity in the field, let's just leave it. People didn't care for them much, and yes, they collapse in just a couple of minutes in a Coca-Cola, or it's next to impossible to build a milkshake to them. But at the end of the day was we had them in the restaurant. I was really proud of them, and I must say I moved on over the next couple of years and didn't really, you know, check back. But I kind of noticed that there was a lot of plastic straws all of a sudden starting to show up in the restaurants when I went on tour. So I did kind of a moral inventory, which I go back to the same thing about entrepreneurs. And you really sometimes in your business life and in your life in general have to do a moral inventory of, are you true to who you are in order to keep those spirits alive that make you well, that make you whole as a person. And just like my need to be an entrepreneur over a big business man chasing the almighty dollar and it is really important to my core values. I was looking and saying, are we living to our core values? Are we living to what we are? And sure enough, we weren't when it came to the plastic straw. So I called the guy up on the phone and I said, say, how are we doing in the paper straw business? He said, well, you all aren't doing much at all, man. You don't hardly buy any, but we're doing great. And what had happened was there was some about dumping, you know, garbage off cruise ships in particular within 3 miles of the coast and around the world. There was a big move at that time, and lo and behold, I know somebody surprising who's been on a cruise. One of the #1 things they dump in the ocean is umbrellas and plastic straws. Since people tend to have a few cocktails when they're out there. And they started buying the paper straw, and the Europeans started buying the paper straw. He said, well, we're opening a factory in 2 months in Rensselaer, Indiana called Aardvark Straw Company, and we're selling straws, paper straws all around the world. And we've perfected them now. And they use a polymer, a modern polymer that's got some beeswax in it that's degradable within a landfill within 150 days, and the Aardvark Straw Company and many others have come. So there's another entrepreneurial story that matched up with our core value of being environmentally sensitive in everything we do, and turned around and recreated an industry, because oftentimes when it's sustainability, what was old becomes new. In other words, we start to reinvent many things that we use in the rural community that protects our environments in our cities. So we've invested in the conservative movement at the National Restaurant Association. Our industry now is using, you know, 20%, 30, 40, 50% less energy, less water, creating less garbage, composting, recycling, things like cornstarch cups and cornstarch to-go-ware and all sorts of recyclables are prevalent. And so, again, we always try to be part of that leading industry. So what we're proud of at Ted's Montana Grill is that we're entrepreneurs still. We're a small business, wholly owned by Ted and I, and we stayed true to that culture that we were going to recreate, and sustainability, and recreate bison on America's table, and we've done that. I just want to end sort of my prepared, well, they weren't very well prepared, but my comments by saying that the one thing that I learned along the way is people always say there's no I in the word team. I disagree. There is I in the team, and it's where do I fit in with the team? How do I be a team player? How do I recognize the individuals at every level within an organization for what they contribute to the health and well-being of the organization? And if you're the leader, you must have the dream, you must set the core values, and you must set the vision for the company. But you can never accomplish it by yourself. There's no lone ranger out there that can save the world, to save the country, or to even manage, own, and operate a small business, let alone a big business. It's all about how we work together as individuals and human beings, how we treat each other with kindness, dignity, and respect, that we recognize the talents of the people that are with us, and we assemble teams of individuals that become one. And the success that I've had and the failings that I've had have come while we've been doing it as a team, not as an individual. And so I'd like to end, if it's possible, if we can get this, I'd like to just end and share with you just a little short video of Ted's Montana Grow and the principles that we stand for. And the reason I show this now is to say every one of the people that's going to speak on this are... Thank you for inviting me. I'm truly honored to have been here, and I am absolutely open to just about any question. Yes, sir.
When is it that we will see a Ted's Montana Grow?
Betty's going to build you one all next year. Actually, we have one restaurant in Bucks County, and we are looking in and around the Philadelphia area. I drove through Pittsburgh yesterday. I think most likely we will come to Pittsburgh in the next couple of years and maybe work our way into the middle. Frankly, you know, from a population standpoint, and us being a group of restaurants managed from a long distance away in Atlanta, I went through town and saw some of the beautiful historic buildings and restaurants down there, and I wanted to retire in Bedford and build a restaurant. I think it'd be a wonderful place. I'm not sure it's geared right here in the county, frankly, for a chain of restaurants. And we try to be a neighborhood restaurant group that focuses on local, but any way you slice it, we do operate a significant number of restaurants. So I don't know. I might be dead before it gets here. Yes, sir.
Do you know you are at the home of the Bison Bedford High School? That's the nickname.
Is that right? That's awesome. Well, I didn't know that, but I'll keep note of it. I have to compliment you all on the community. I mean, I was fortunate enough to drive around with Betty, and of course, over the years, I've seen many pictures of bear dance in the neighborhood. And I remember my father, this was his territory, that he would come here to the Springs for conferences or drive through the area and talking about it. So you truly do have a magical place to live and exist and practice your entrepreneurial spirit. So I admire your fortune. Yes, sir.
You're based in Atlanta. How come you started in Columbus, Ohio?
It's a good question. Matter of timing. Basically, what we set out to do was build a national brand. Again, one of the big folks is really, Ted's Montana Grow to Ted was a marketing adventure. Now, it wasn't working the way we were doing it. In other words, we had a 4-year surplus of bison in the freezer. And we were literally taking animals to market for the 2 tenderloins, or a little bit of the rump roast to go to Europe. And the rest was going in the freezer, and there just wasn't a market for it. And so again, the bison ranchers, the cooperative was giving out IOUs, and you know, those of you know, you can't go back to the bank and pay the bank back with an IOU. And so we really felt that we needed to make a national presence, and we believed that, or surmised, I guess, but believed also that wherever we built a Ted's Montana Grow, and we were successful at delivering high quality food and service and bison the right way in conjunction with a good restaurant, that the demand for bison would go up, and that the folks would go to their local grocery store and say, hey, I ate this amazing bison over here, I'd like to buy it here at King Soopers or the Kroger's or the Publix or whatever grocery store chains in your neighborhood. So we had a message to get out there as quickly as possible. So I did some research, actually in Los Angeles, Dallas, Baltimore, Ohio, and Atlanta and Denver. Denver was #1 per capita consumption of bison in the country. Columbus I had some familiarity with because I'd gone to school at Ohio State, and it's a top tier, entry-level research market for the Midwest, kind of a test market. And then of course Ted and I both being from the Atlanta market, and me being there and knowing the community, we decided to go there. So I set out to do all these restaurants. So I said it earlier, blank piece of paper on July 1st, literally, and I remember going, oh my goodness, what did I sign up for? And then having to create everything from every recipe to designing the restaurant and go out and find leases. It just so happened that we had leases in Atlanta, Nashville, Denver, and Columbus came first by about 6 weeks over the first Atlanta restaurant. And so that's why it wasn't intentional. We actually call Lucky Street, which is where our home office is, building Ted bought, across from CNN, and that's one of our top performing restaurants. We call that #1 because we really planned it first, but it took us 1.5 years to get it built. That's how we ended up there. Yes?
What do you identify as the biggest threats facing the restaurant industry in particular as we move forward?
For the Congress, was it overregulation? Our industry is so much different than it was when I started, and it used to be about cost of goods sold, so I'll just relate this. In 1975, when I worked for Victoria Station Restaurants, you could eat a USDA choice 11-ounce track of prime rib, freshly roasted, unlimited salad bar, and a baked potato for $4.75. You'd be hard-pressed to find that meal anywhere in the United States for less than $25 or $30+ today. So we've seen tremendous pressure on cost of goods, but that was really all we really had to worry about. Labor was affordable. We had tip credit, and we had, hourly tips. Our hourly team members that work for tips, we've done research, make between $28 and $40 an hour. They make a tremendous amount of money, and the industry has worked over the last 30 years with the Internal Revenue Service, and they declare those tips, and they pay taxes on them. And it's mostly because about 90 to 95% of all revenue is paid to us in the form of a credit card. So we have a record of their tips. It's not a cash business anymore. A fallacy that goes around on the minimum wage side is that these people are, making $2 an hour and that we're some sort of really tough employer. The biggest pressure coming our way has been the last 2 years is healthcare. Cost our little company $1 million to pay for insurance. My big gripe isn't that we provide insurance for full-time employees. My gripe is that 30 hours magically in that bill became a full-time job, and I don't know anywhere else in the country where anything less than 40 hours is a full-time job, except for qualification for healthcare. That would save a lot of small businesses a lot of money. So that we've kind of gotten over that hurdle, and you've seen it in inflation in the cost of a cheeseburger. When we started Ted's Montana Grill 15 years ago, a bison cheeseburger was $7 or $8. It's 15 or 16 today. The next big thing is labor. Labor unions are really made advancement during the current administration. There's all sorts of push for unionization, and particularly the hospitality industry. Minimum wage laws, state by state, county by county, city by city. There's 9 states, I think it is, in the country that have a CPI rise, so which means it's going to go up with inflation every year, regardless. Florida, Colorado, Montana, some other states. Eventually, that's going to get completely out of control, especially if we start to see inflation. And then, this big push for the $15 minimum wage, which just amazes me, from $7.35 an hour to $15 is somehow considered reasonable. So that's a big, the union and the labor is a big thing. And then occupancy costs. The cost to build is more than double. And it's all a factor goes to in a development business like that is. The cost of land has gone up every year, and there's some cheap money out there, so people are able to finance high price per acre, which is good for the folks selling it, but that just pushes it through the system, and the cost of materials has doubled, and the cost of labor has doubled, and the pressures on business. So we've gotten it from all areas. So where we used to say we could be a 10 to 15% net earnings business in the 80s and 90s when we took the company public, 5 to 8% net earnings is considered a highly successful restaurant company now. So the pressures are there. So headwinds are there. But the other thing, and this is not to get long-winded, but nutrition has become a whole different experience for a lot of folks. So a Whole Foods, a Wegmans, whatever, have full-service restaurants in them. 46% is pre-prepared food. You just run in and get it, take it home. To-go business has doubled, even in spite of we don't really want to be in the to-go business, to 10% of our sales from 5% because people like the convenience of ordering it and having to go. Amazon, Uber, and all sorts of other people are doing delivery of food, and quick service and fast casual. And so there's over 1 million restaurants in the country, and probably there's too many seats for the amount of dining out public we have. And there's a movement to feel like you're eating at home, so now you can get Blue Apron and all sorts of other people to, I guess, eventually have a drone drop off your box in your front yard, and you get it out, prepare it, and now you've had a home-cooked meal. So the pressures abound from everywhere, and it's just not quite as much fun or nearly as lucrative as it used to be, but I'm addicted, and after 40 plus years, I guess they'll take me out of the restaurant 10 toes up and stiff as a board.
Do you think the trend of not tipping is going to catch on?
No, I don't. I think it's, Danny Meyer is a friend of mine. He didn't do us any favors. When you got a $175 prefix menu and you tell you're going to now charge you $200 or $240, nobody cares. But the average consumer wants to be able to say thank you for the type of service that they've gotten. The hourly team members are more than happy to make half of minimum wage or less and have the right to be. Think about what a food server or a tipped employee is. They are simply leasing 3 or 4 tables or revenue generators and chairs. Like an average Ted's Montana Grove generates about $25,000 per chair per year. So if you're going to get 15 to 20% of that, which they average about 18%, if you're going to get 20% of that, and you have 12 or 16 chairs that you're responsible for, it's a very nice living. I mean, there's a lot of our food service, like I said, we've done research, like New York City, just an example. They saw fit to raise wages for tipped employees from $4.50 to $9. So they got a $4.50 an hour raise. Our tipped employees in New York City were already making $42 an hour when they got the $4 raise. So I don't know what we're fixing. We're just putting pressure on small business. And so I hope it doesn't happen. I don't think it'll catch on. Folks at Ignite that did it really regret it. And I haven't seen much of it. And I think the employees are opposed to it. I think we need to tell the story better. The Employment Policies Institute that we support in Washington, Rick Berman, talks a lot about. The truth is that our team members are very, very well compensated. And our heart of house employees, if they do start at a minimum wage and they're any good, they are there. And if they do, I'm sure in fast casual that some might, but our team members are all $10, $12 an hour and up. So we're fixing something that isn't broken, but it sounds good. Any other questions? Well, thank you very, very much. I'm honored to be here.